economic and national security priorities that you see more clearly when it comes to going to Mars right now than in terms of having a permanent presence on the moon?
Well, Senator, to be clear, I certainly hope in the future that we have lots of space stations, a full lunar outpost, a Mars outpost, and we're pushing even beyond that. I'm just saying we need to get back to the moon. We need to figure out why we need to be there, and I certainly hope there is a reason.
What I'm trying to get a sense of, you seem much more definitive about saying we need to get to Mars and putting resources towards that effort. What are the specific economic, scientific, and national security interests you see there? Because I get a sense that you have some greater clarity there than you do when it comes to the moon.
Well, I would actually hope you're getting a sincere answer from me that we should be doing both and the other things. Now,
You think we can do both moon and the Mars on the current NASA budget?
I sure hope so. NASA was built to do the near impossible and have a thriving space economy in low Earth orbit and continue extraordinary science missions to kind of unlock the secrets of the universe, sir.
Well, I guess I just want to reinforce what the chairman said. I mean, I think we need to have much more clarity in how we're talking about what it is our objectives when it comes to the moon. As mentioned, we have a lot more clarity about what China's objectives are, and I hope that that is something that you can clarify quickly if you are confirmed. When it comes to the International Space Station, what is your perceived timeline there in terms of when we should be starting to bring that down?
Well, Senator, first of all, I don't know of any reason why we should be bringing it down before what's currently scheduled. What I do think we need to do is maximize its remaining life, get as much of the high potential science and research to the station, figure out what that space economy is, so when the day does come to hand it off to the commercial LEO destinations, they are in a financially, self-sustaining type way.
And you talked about that in terms of the space economy. In terms of what should succeed the International Space Station, do you believe that that should be commercial only, or do you see prospects of the U.S. government or a government-run space station to succeed the International Space Station?
Well, right now, Senator, if we don't figure out the space economy, whether it's commercially operated or not, it's going to be entirely financially sustained by the government.
So but I guess I'm asking, do you have a preference in terms of, do you see a sense of need for a government run? I guess I'm just trying to ask you, what is it that NASA can do that commercial efforts can't do?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Senator. I mean, the line should be drawn, again, in terms of NASA undertaking the near impossible challenges that, again, no company, organization, or agency anywhere in the world would be able to undertake. I gave a very good example, I think, in my opening remarks on nuclear propulsion. That's something that no company would ever embark upon. There is no obvious economic return. There's regulatory challenges. That's exactly the kind of thing that NASA should be concentrating its resources on.
The last thing I just want to say here, and I know I'm running out of time, I'm really hard to see. I think we're all very proud of the astronauts that are here in this room. But I think I could speak for them and say, look, we also recognize the importance of the civil servants playing so many different roles for the safety and the innovation that's out there. As I expressed to you, I am concerned about how this administration has approached what I believe are indiscriminate cuts and firings at different departments and agencies. And if you're confirmed, I hope that you stand up against indiscriminate cuts. I think we're all very recognizing that there are places for efficiencies and elsewhere, but we need to make sure that we're protecting the expertise that's out there. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our two nominees today for your commitment to public service. Ms. Trustee, I appreciated meeting with you to learn more about your experience and your goals if you're confirmed as an FCC commissioner. And as you know, one of my top goals is to maintain a steady and predictable universal service fund. Congress's intent has been clear. We must keep all Americans connected. I also look forward to co-chairing the Universal Service Fund Working Group with Senator Lujan to advance this priority. Ms. Trustee, how do you view the Universal Service Fund and its mission to universal service?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator, and thank you for the time. It was great to meet with you and discuss your priorities. The universal service is the cornerstone of the FCC's mission. The Universal Service Fund itself has connected millions of Americans across the country. As you know, there's somewhat of an uncertain future with the Universal Service Fund, as there's a constitutional challenge before the Supreme Court, and the contribution base is shrinking as more Americans shift to internet-based communications. And so I think it's incumbent upon the FCC to work closely with Congress and interested stakeholders to identify a specific, predictable, and sufficient form of support as required in the Communications Act to continue meeting the needs of Americans across the country.
Thank you. From my experience serving on this committee and also on Armed Services Committee, I appreciate the differing cultures, missions, and priorities of the various spectrum stakeholders, and I've seen the consequences when they conflict. I worry that federal missions, including national security, can be undermined because of these frictions, particularly when collaboration among stakeholders is strained and consensus can't be reached. Ms. Trustee, what do you think the appropriate role is for the FCC and its engagement with the Department of Defense?
Thank you, Senator. And I appreciate this question because I know this is such an important topic and a sensitive one, too. So, as you've noted, I've worked on both the Armed Services and Commerce Committees, both great experiences. During my time on the Armed Services Committee, I've certainly developed a greater appreciation for DoD's national security mission and how critical spectrum is in carrying out that mission. I also know from my time on the Commerce Committee that spectrum is the lifeblood of wireless communications. It's essential to meeting our economic objectives both domestically and abroad. And so I think given these two experiences, I can certainly help find solutions where there's common ground, where we don't have to sacrifice our spectrum for our warfighting needs, but we can also create opportunities to repurpose spectrum for commercial use. And I think the way to do that, frankly, is to have everybody in the same room at the same time, hearing the same things. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of information that gets lost in translation, contributing to further misalignment on spectrum policy. When we're all together, it can further promote transparency and accountability in these processes.
How do you think this dialogue can become more constructive? Do you have any suggestions on how to do that? As a member of the staff on the Armed Services Committee, you had access to classified briefings that others do not have access to. So you have a fuller understanding of what's at stake here. So how can we have a constructive dialogue?
Well, Senator, I think that's the issue. When I was on the Commerce Committee, I didn't have a full clearance, and so I wasn't privy to many of DoD's assets and capabilities. But when I was on the Armed Services Committee, I had a clearance and could understand better, or to a better degree, why some of the assets and systems were so essential. I'll say, though, I think we have to find a way to accommodate both our national security and economic security interests. I worry that if either side of this debate fails, then our global competitors win, and I think that would have a devastating consequence to our economic and national security.
And I think we're beginning to achieve that way forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking at the international role on telecommunications, how can a more unified position among federal agencies boost the United States global leadership? How can we ensure that national security perspectives are included in an overall position that we have for this country?
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you for this. So I had the opportunity to attend the last WRC in Dubai, and I think the takeaway was that America didn't put our best foot forward because we didn't have a unified approach to our spectrum policy. And so I think if we have a unified strategy where we highlight key U.S. interests, whether with respect to both our economic and national security, it gives us more time and space to work with our international partners and allies to develop coalitions where they have a lot of similar interests. And going into it, that way we can preempt those who are attempting to undermine U.S. values, among other things.
And if confirmed as an FCC commissioner, the commission as a whole would definitely have a leadership role in that process, correct?
Absolutely. So the Department of State typically runs the WRC process, but NTIA and the FCC certainly contribute to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both of you for being here. You win the prize as the best name for a nominee, Ms. Trustee. I just wanted to have one follow-up from Senator Fisher's questions, because I care a lot about universal service. Senator Thune and I have worked a lot on that together. How do you think the FCC should modernize the USF to ensure its long-term sustainability?
Thank you for the question, Senator. You know, I know that there are a number of proposals on the table, whether it comes from identifying a specific, predictable, or sufficient funding resource to ensure the Universal Service Fund can continue to meet connectivity needs across the country. There are proposals about a federal appropriation or looking to other private sector entities to contribute to the contribution base. I think all of those things should be discussed between the FCC and Congress to ensure we can continue meeting connectivity needs across the country.
Thank you. As you know, I work with Senator Wicker on the Data Act to improve the accuracy of the FCC's broadband availability maps, but we know more work needs to be done. If confirmed, how will you continue to work to ensure the accuracy of the maps?
Thank you, Senator. So, you know, I was on this committee when the Broadband Data Act was passed with the goal of making sure we knew where broadband is available, where it's not, to better target resources to unserved areas. You know, as a part of that law, there's an opportunity for a challenge process where folks can challenge the accuracy of the data, which I think can help improve the accuracy of the maps. I also think the FCC should work with private sector stakeholders who produce their own maps to inform the accuracy of the maps so that we can better target resources to areas who remain unserved or who remain served.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And as you know, care a lot about getting the broadband funding out. We've talked to a number of nominees about that. And then I'll ask you a question writing on 911. So
Thank you,
thank
Senator.
you. Mr. Isaacman, welcome. And we had a good talk over the phone. I mentioned STEM was really important to me. I was looking back in 2017, President Trump signed into law. I remember because Senator Fisher called me from the White House. She was there and she said, "What is this bill of yours he's signing into law?" Because she happened to be there. And they did an event. So it was a bill authorizing the NASA administrator to encourage women to study STEM. It's called the Inspire Women Act, and pursue careers in aerospace. Could you talk about promoting the STEM workforce and in your role, if confirmed as NASA administrator, how you can inspire more people to go into STEM in general? Just coming off the robotics competition in Minnesota on Saturday. Thank you. I was there.
Understood, Senator. First step is I'm still working on getting my two daughters to want to grow up and enter into the STEM fields. I've tried with spaceflight, and I will get there. I would love to answer that really in two parts. I think the first thing is it is a fundamental obligation of NASA to inspire the next generation to want to be scientists, engineers, astronauts, pilots, doctors, researchers. And I think the best way NASA can do that is by executing on its mission. I mean, that is what's going to have children want to dress up as astronauts and scientists for Halloween, is to get back to the moon, to get to Mars, and to inspire the world with whatever the replacement is someday for James Webb that gives us 100 times the resolution. The second part, ma'am, is what I mentioned in my opening remarks about NASA being a force multiplier for science. Once we inspire them in their youth to want to grow up and join this grand endeavor, we want to get them hands-on in their various academic institutions. I think NASA can lend its expertise, its talent, its bulk buying of rockets, its standard bus architecture, and get academic institutions to want to contribute, whether it's building probes or sensors, get them hands-on so when they graduate, they want to join the greatest space agency in the world.
Very good. You know, I think not just with space, but also with medical developments right now, because of a combination of mapping of the human genome. I'm home of Mayo Clinic, Minnesota, as well as the potential of AI to do good when it comes to things like rare diseases. We're just on this cusp of scientific development kind of bursting out. And I do get concerned about some of these cuts to science-based research and agencies across the government, not just space-related. Will you be an advocate for science within the administration?
Yes, ma'am. I do believe the president is looking to usher in a golden age of science and discovery. Personally, I just spent a few days ago with 40 different science and researchers sharing the results from my most recent mission to space. I'm passionate about science. I'd love nothing more than to continue to see NASA go out and try and unlock the secrets of the universe.
Thank you.
Phenomenal plugs for Minnesota in that questioning.
Always find a way. You'll learn that soon, Mr. Marino.
So Senator Moran, see if you can top that for Kansas.
Well, that wasn't what I intended to talk about, but I'm happy to promote my state and have to, certainly to Mr. Isaacman. Wichita, in particular, the air capital of the world, Wichita State, NIAR, and these astronauts, when I had a conversation with them by phone, asked me the question, do you know that you have the greatest space museum in the world in Kansas? To which I said, I know that. I'm just pleased that you know that. Can I tell the rest of the world that you're saying those things? And so I thank you for that opportunity, the Cosmosphere in Hutchinson, Kansas. Ms. Trustee, let me start with you. I'm pleased by your nomination that President Trump has chosen to nominate you. I appreciate the friendship you and I have had over a long period of time of my office in Dirksen, and we've passed and had conversations in the hall for a long time. I have great faith in you. Let me ask you these. Well, on that topic, let me tell you that it's been my disappointment over time to watch the FCC become much more partisan and incapable of reaching decisions. It's changed in the time that I've been in the Senate, as the Senate has changed in the time that I've been in the Senate. And I would encourage you to use every effort to find ways to find solutions to problems and to bring the commission together to serve the American people. And I don't know that I need to ask you, but I assume you would say that you will do so.
Yes, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you. I want to mention just spectrum policy, as a couple of my colleagues have mentioned before. Looking at Congress's options about authorities to the FCC when it comes to reauthorizing that spectrum auction authority, what would your recommendations be?
Thank you, Senator. I think this is very important. So I would recommend that Congress restore auction authority as quickly as possible. I think it can be a catalyst to investment and innovation, particularly as it relates to expanding broadband infrastructure across the country. I also think it serves as a signal to the rest of the world about how we're prioritizing our telecommunications policy and where we're going. This is underpinning every emerging application that we can think of: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and so much more. And so I think by showing that we have confidence in our regulatory processes and frameworks to have auction authority restored to support that kind of innovation, I think that will go a long way.
Ms. Trustee, media ownership is back in the news again. Do you believe it's important for the FCC to rid us of the rules that are no longer necessary or inhibit competition that currently exist in media ownership rules?
Yeah, appreciate the question, Senator. I definitely think we need a modern regulatory framework that reflects the realities of today's video media marketplace. As you know, the media marketplace has changed dramatically over the last 2 decades, driven largely by technology advancements and changes in consumer preferences. Consumers have access to all sorts of things, your traditional broadcast and cable, as well as live streaming video and social media, all things that make for a great personalized television viewing experience, and things that I think the FCC should continue to promote, that allows broadcasters to flexibly compete against technology companies for ad revenues, consumer viewers, as well as programming.
Ms. Trustee, that's particularly true in rural America, where the options are fewer than they used to be, and local programming is a difficult task to accomplish. So I encourage you to pursue those changes. One more, BEAD implementation. One of the things we're worried about is the timing of the FCC's efforts in deploying broadband funds when BEAD is yet uncompleted, because one of the goals is to make sure that we don't overbuild and that you're not both providing dollars to the same opportunities to provide broadband and internet services. So how would you consider the FCC in holding off moving forward on allocating 5G funding until BEAD allocation decisions have been made in order to maximize that, the efficiency of those 5G funds?
I appreciate this question, Senator. This goes to the heart of interagency coordination. I think the FCC and NTIA need to be in constant contact about where BEAD is going, when it's going, so that we can be better stewards of taxpayer dollars, target funds to unserved areas, ensure that there's no duplication or overbuilding, as you mentioned. And there could be a possibility where BEAD infrastructure could be leveraged for USF funds or vice versa. But I think this all goes to interagency coordination and making sure we're the best stewards of taxpayer dollars. So you have my commitment that I would do that, Senator, if confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Isaacman, let me tell you that I now have concern about your leadership capabilities while you were indicating that you were working on getting your daughters to pursue STEM education, both of them were shaking their heads this way. I hope you can fare better at NASA.
We're going to fix this, Senator.
In the short 12 seconds that I have left in my time, I'll ask, I guess, one question. Do you believe that the current Artemis architecture featuring SLS rocket or Orion spacecraft is the best and fastest way to beat China to the moon?
Senator, this is the current plan. I do believe it's the best and fastest way to get there. I don't think it's the long-term way to get to and from the moon and to Mars with great frequency, but this is the plan we have now, and we've got to get this crew around the moon and the follow-on crew to land on the moon.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I recognize Senator from Michigan, Gary Peters.
Thank you, Senator. Congratulations to both of our nominees here on your nomination to these important positions. Mr. Isaacman, we had a great opportunity to talk yesterday in my office about a variety of issues. Artemis came up frequently, as I know it's come up at the hearing frequently as well, including Senator Moran in the previous question. And you suggested here and there that NASA can pursue the Artemis program or a mission to the moon and a potential Mars mission in parallel tracks, is how you've been describing it. I'm concerned, though, about the possibility of achieving that while we expect budget cuts to NASA. We've already seen cuts, and somewhat significant cuts, I would argue, to staff at NASA. So my question for you is, do you agree that budget cuts would undermine that vision that you are expressing?
Well, Senator, I think right now NASA has a pretty extraordinary budget. I believe it's close to every federal law enforcement agency combined ×2. With that budget and those resources available, I do believe we can do the near impossible. I think we can have multiple flagship scientific missions at once, which means we can have multiple space exploration missions at once and try and solve the space economy in low Earth orbit, sir.
Even with budget cuts, you'll be able to do that?
Well, Senator, I'm not familiar with what what's potentially being contemplated, but I will absolutely do the most with the resources available to try and deliver on NASA's world-changing mission, sir.
So given I think it's pretty clear we're likely to see constrained budgets, how do you envision speeding up our timeline for the Mars mission that you talked about while also ensuring that Artemis is properly resourced and protected from any future cuts that may come their way?
Well, Senator, I think across the board, we have to acknowledge, as I mentioned in our opening remarks, we do have problems here. The presidents have called for return to the moon and a path to Mars since 1989. We spent a lot of money, and we haven't gotten this crew around the moon, let alone landing on it. If I'm confirmed, I absolutely am going to roll up my sleeves and get in the trenches with the best and brightest and figure out where we have our program challenges, what's impeding progress, clear those obstacles, and get back to delivering on the mission. If we can do that, then we're going to get the inspirational side of NASA going, we're going to get the STEM side growing, and the next generation is going to grow up and want to reach even farther, sir.
As you know, public-private partnerships between NASA and commercial space companies is a critical part of space exploration efforts. You know that firsthand from your flight to space twice with SpaceX. And I understand that you have business ties with SpaceX previous to your nomination as well. My question for you, given the fact that Elon Musk serves both as the CEO of SpaceX as well as is a White House employee and leader over DOGE, which has significant influence over spending and contracts, at least that's what we have been seeing. Certainly in our meeting, I was happy to hear you say to me that you are not beholden to Elon Musk in any way. So I want to give you an opportunity to say that on the record, if I may. So first, have you had any communication, emails, text, or calls with Elon Musk regarding how your plan to manage NASA since you were nominated?
Not at all, Senator.
What steps will you take, if confirmed, to ensure that he is not allowed undue influence, given the extensive contracts that he has with NASA, to make sure that he has no undue influence over the awarding or the implementation of those contracts?
Well, I think, Senator, I absolutely want to be clear. My loyalty is to this nation, the space agency, and their world-changing mission. I have to imagine that in the 1960s, Administrator Webb would have taken phone calls and welcomed the input from all the various contractors that were contributing to the endeavor. But they're the contractors. NASA's the customer. They work for us, not the other way around, Senator.
Very good. Ms. Trustee, you have a deep history working on defense-related spectrum issues that are absolutely critical, as you know, to our security apparatus. However, agencies other than the DoD use spectrum for key public safety applications, and I believe that they need to be protected as well. One such band is 5.9, also known as the auto safety spectrum, which is overseen by the Department of Transportation. This band allows for the deployment of safety technologies, including cellular vehicle-to-everything technology that certainly enables collision avoidance, freight efficiency movements, and a whole lot more. In 2020, some of the spectrum was allocated away from these auto safety purposes, which in my mind will reduce roadway safety in the long term. And I believe we can't let that happen again. I think my senator from Ohio will agree that we have to make sure auto safety is always put at the forefront of considerations when it comes to this spectrum. So my question to you is, if confirmed, will you commit to protecting the remaining auto safety spectrum for roadway safety innovation like the cellular vehicle-to-everything technology?
Senator, thank you for this question. It's really important to me. In my time in the House, I worked closely with NHTSA on vehicle safety issues, so I'm very familiar with the life-saving potential of CVDX, V2V, and so I think if confirmed, my responsibility is to put spectrum to its highest and best use, meaning maximizing its economic and societal benefits. When it comes to vehicle safety, that will certainly be a part of the information in the record, and I'd be happy to work with you to ensure that CVDX can be deployed with the resources it needs so it's readily available to all Americans.
Well, I hope it is a priority, and we'll, if confirmed, we will work closely with you.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each of you for getting that testimony in and for being here today. We appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. Mr. Isaacman, I was so pleased to hear you talk about nuclear propulsion. We have Oak Ridge National Labs. We have Arnold Air, which is the only place you can do hypersonic testing. And, of course, Huntsville and Marshall Space Flight is very close to our Tennessee border. We have a lot of Tennesseans that are there. So pleased to hear you put some emphasis on that. We agree with you that emphasis needs to be placed there. But I want you to just give me a synopsis of what you think is the most important area of competition as we look at what is happening with China, with Russia, with great power competition, what North Korea and Iran are doing.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. For starters, competition can work really well. I think competition from a commercial perspective is doing great. We've gone from a world where at one point in time the nation had a dependency on one launch provider and foreign rocket technology. Now we have a very mature commercial industry with several providers able to help us accelerate mass and people and astronauts into orbit. Well, competition works well on the global stage as well, ma'am, so long as we don't lose. And right now, I mean, that couldn't be more important in the ultimate high ground of space. I mean, that is a critically important domain. NASA will continue to press out, lead the way in that ultimate high ground, but we're going to need our partners in the Department of Defense, the Space Force. We're going to need to be collaborating and making sure they're watching out for us.
Ms. Trustee, welcome. And I'm so pleased to see so many of your family members here to support you, and to all of the, I guess it's nieces and nephews that are here.
That's right, and siblings and friends.
Just know she's really smart, and she's working hard. Okay, we talked a little bit about spectrum, and as you know, it concerns me that 60% of our mid-band spectrum is held by federal agencies. Much of that is sitting fallow, is not being used. We cannot afford that. We're commercializing only 5% of that. So talk to me about the importance of NTIA conducting an inventory the importance of the FCC supporting an inventory, the importance of Congress restoring the ability to have spectrum auction authority.
Thank you, Senator, for this question. So I'll start kind of from the first part about restoring auction authority. As I mentioned previously, I think this is incredibly important to our economic and national security. I think auction authority serves as a catalyst to investment and innovation, not just for broadband deployment across this country, but for emerging technologies and applications that will allow us to be a global leader in technological innovation. As far as supporting an inventory, I think an inventory could be good. It tells us what spectrum is being used and how. As you know, there may be some things that are classified or sapped and they won't be available to the public, but certainly members of the committee could have access to that information to make more informed decisions about spectrum management. But I think we do need to have a full view of what's available, what's being used, so that we can properly put spectrum to its highest and best use for economical.
And maybe even share some of that spectrum.
Potentially, as the studies indicate. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about USF. I know Senator Fisher and Senator Klobuchar asked you about that. And I think USF has outlived its usefulness and needs to be replaced with something different. We'll see what the court has to say about it. So articulate reforms if they say you can keep USF, and replacement if they say you cannot.
Sure, Senator, I appreciate this question. So universal service is the cornerstone of the FCC's mission. It's a part of the Communications Act to advance and preserve universal service generally as a concept.
I just want to
yes,
know
as well.
reforms. Yeah.
Yes, Senator. So there could be distribution reforms or contribution reforms, depending on what the facts tell us. I think there's an opportunity to have performance metrics for each of the programs to understand what the efficacy is of each of those programs in addressing the needs. There could be better oversight over eligibility requirements. There could also be better oversight over participating providers' compliance with those programs to ensure that those dollars are being targeted to those who need them.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to send you one question on payola.
Yes, ma'am.
Because that is so important to our artists there in Tennessee. And to each of you, all the children deserve ice cream. They've been awesome today.
Thank you, Senator.
I would ask Senator Blackburn, is the ice cream limited to the children?
Senator Cruz, you showed up on time today, so you, too, deserve ice cream. I will be certain that at lunch I serve you ice cream.
I will take it. Senator Lujan.
Well, it looks like I'm joining you for lunch, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for this hearing today. It's good to see you both here and with family support. That means something. Ms. Trustee, in last month's Supreme Court oral arguments in the USF case, the Solicitor General noted that the FCC commissioners do not have statutory for-cause removal protections. In our meeting yesterday, you stated that the issue of for-cause removal was subject to pending litigation and that you would not weigh in. Regardless, it appears that President Trump believes he can fire you at will when confirmed. How will you maintain your independence if the president can fire you simply because he may not like a position you take?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the question, and I understand the importance of the issue. My job, if confirmed, is to focus on upholding and enforcing the law. Whatever happens with what's subject to pending litigation, my first obligation is to fax the law, and with respect to the proceeding that comes before the commission. And that's, I think the FCC has a very transparent and open process, and my commitment would be to making sure that I have, what I would commit to, I have no fear, I would, without fear or favor, I would make a decision with respect to any individual or entity that comes before the commission.
I appreciate that. Yesterday when we spoke, I shared with you I was a former utility commissioner and the importance of the training I received as an administrative law judge. And while we may be able to gather information elsewhere, it's the importance of the record. The decisions that will be made that are in front of you will be based on the record that is established. Is that something you agree with?
Yes, Senator.
I appreciate that. Ms. Trustee, as I shared with you yesterday, I've also been very disturbed by the actions taken by Chair Carr to investigate broadcast companies for their editorial decision-making. In January, Chair Carr reinstated complaints against ABC regarding its moderation of the debate between Trump and Harris. Trump complained that the debate was, quote, rigged, and stated, quote, they ought to take away their license for the way they did that. Do you think it's appropriate for the president to call for the revocation of broadcast licenses?
So, Senator, I think President Trump has First Amendment rights to express his views. My responsibility, if confirmed, is to focus on the facts, FCC precedent, and the law in carrying out whatever the decision-making process is for proceeding before the commission.
As part of that, in March of 2025, Chair Carr gave an interview to Bloomberg News in which he said, any business that are looking for FCC approval, I would encourage them to get busy ending any sort of their invidious forms of DEI discrimination. In addition, Chair Carr said that CBS's editorial decision regarding an interview with Vice President Harris would factor into the review. My question to you is, do you think it's appropriate to consider a broadcaster's editorial decisions when reviewing a merger?
So, Senator, with respect to mergers or transactions, I would look at them through the lens of what advances the public interest. As you know, these are very fact-specific cases that require a thoughtful and thorough review of information in the record, and I would be guided by the statute.
Let me ask the question very clearly. Do you believe that the FCC should be weaponized against media organizations?
No, Senator.
I appreciate that very much. Now, Mr. Isaacman, I have many questions for you. I want to be, I'm always aware of my members, my colleagues' time as well. I'm going to submit your questions to the record. Ms. Trustee, I just want to conclude by sharing with you that you have an ethical record. You have a strong reputation on Capitol Hill. Protect it. You have a bright future. We need good Democrats, good Republicans. I don't agree with all your positions. I don't agree with all my Democratic colleagues' positions. But the FCC should be a strong, independent body. We need good people there, and I appreciate you being here today. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before we continue, for the record, Senator Fetterman would like to be recorded as an aye by proxy on the Roth nomination.
Without objection, the record will be corrected to so reflect. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to our nominees, congratulations, and thank you for willing to serve your country and your families. Great to see so many families here. Ms. Trustee, I want to make sure I get your commitment off the bat to come to Alaska, see the many challenges we have in Alaska. You can bring your whole family. We can do it during the summer. Go fishing, but I need you to get out to my state and see the challenges, particularly as it relates to communications, broadband, internet connectivity. You know, people talk about rural, and then there's Alaska, which is just way more rural than everywhere else. Can I get your commitment to do that?
Absolutely, Senator.
And you know, when the FCC commissioners do that, they've all come to our state. They realize that in terms of the FCC, there's really the need for importance on embracing flexible policies as it relates to Alaska. The FCC came up with the Alaska Plan, as I'm sure you're aware of, and then they've now referred to that as the FCC's Alaska Connect Fund. Will you commit to me to working with on any future changes? There's a midpoint pause in 2029 relating to the Alaska Connect pause that gives the FCC the opportunity to look at different flexibilities there. Can I get your commitment to work with me on both what was the Alaska Plan and now the Alaska Connect Fund?
Yes, Senator, I'd be happy to.
That has strong bipartisan support over the last several years in the FCC. Pretty much all the commissioners have supported it. Can I get your commitment on that?
Yes, Senator.
Great. I'm going to ask you a question for the record on media ownership that I'd like your response on. Mr. Isaacman, have you seen the movie The Martian?
I have, Senator.
Okay, I have well, my daughters are older now, but when I took them to see that, they were very inspired. And you kind of have the Hollywood version, the live version right here with all these smart, good-looking astronauts in our hearing room today. Can you give me your ideas on how to promote better through media, maybe even through Hollywood, these upcoming missions to the moon, missions to Mars, to inspire our young people? I think it's a really, really great opportunity. I don't think NASA's always embraced that opportunity, but we have so many exciting things on the horizon, and I mean it when you look at these astronauts and how smart they are and how inspiring they can be to young Americans to serve their country, to study science. Give me your thoughts on that and what an opportunity we have to take advantage of that.
Well, Senator, I completely agree. And as I mentioned before, I think it's a fundamental obligation of NASA to inspire the next generation to want to grow up and be scientists, engineers, astronauts, researchers, and set the bar even higher. And I do believe the first step on that journey is to execute on the mission. I mean, nothing's going to create more future scientists and engineers than seeing American astronauts on the moon, American astronauts on the Mars, in line with President Trump's vision, planting the stars and stripes on Mars. So I do think that is a fundamental obligation. I think that NASA right now, we could do a better job, if confirmed, on emphasizing quality content over quantity. There's, I think, about 300 different NASA social channels. They're awesome. They put a lot of good things out. I think we can narrow that down and make sure we're capturing the really inspirational footage, what everybody wants to see that inspires them to grow up and want to reach even higher. Good.
I think you'll have strong bipartisan support for doing that. I also want to get your commitment, if confirmed, to come to Alaska.
Senator, as a pilot, I've been fortunate to fly around Alaska quite a bit, and I would point out on aircraft that rolled off assembly lines in Wichita. I know Senator Moran would like to hear that. I'm looking forward to returning.
Good, because as you know, and you've helped pioneer commercial space flight, you know better than most that the future of space access isn't just Cape Canaveral or Vandenberg. It is increasingly spread across our entire country, including places like Alaska. The specific spaceport complex on Kodiak Island is the only high-altitude polar-capable spaceport in the United States. There is rising demand for facilities like that at Kodiak in terms of both government and commercial launches. They've done both, and I would love to take you out to Kodiak Island, not just to see the largest brown bears in the world, of which we have thousands, but a really, really up-and-coming spaceport complex. Have you ever spent time out at the Kodiak Spaceport Complex?
Senator, I have been there. I did not see any bears. I was looking, and I would love to return, sir.
Okay, so you and I are going to return, and we'll get an eye on some bears, maybe do some fishing with Miss Trusty when she brings her family. But in all seriousness, that is a spaceport complex that I think has enormous potential. Would you agree with that?
Senator, I think that, as mentioned before, space is the ultimate high ground. It's a vitally important domain for national security. I frankly think we need more spaceports. We have to always ensure our access to low Earth orbit and ensure national security.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And by the way, if anything, Senator Sullivan is underselling the fishing in Alaska. It is phenomenal. It's not quite as big a state as Texas, but it has enormous natural beauty.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you don't want to do the size stuff with me.
Senator Blunt Rochester, at yet another massive state.
That's correct. That's correct. Delaware. And we are, that's right. We're the first state, though. That's the important thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Ranking Member Cantwell. Welcome, Ms. Trustee and Mr. Isaacman and your families. I'd like to start my questions with Ms. Trustee. As an avid tech person myself, I love this stuff. Based on predictions, I've seen that 6G is coming sometime in the early 2030s. And I've heard exciting things about how 6G networks will be integrated with AI to enable better connectivity. In the House, I was fortunate to lead bills on immersive technology and it really helping us train our workforce. AI literacy was one of the bills that I focused on, and just the notion of being able to do things in real time, real-time adaptive changes present a lot of opportunities, but it also presents challenges. There were some issues that delayed the initial 5G rollout, such as Huawei's being used as a potential supplier, infrastructure build-out issues, and more. And I view the 6G rollout as a crucial step in our competition against China in the national security realm, as well as technology spaces. Ms. Trustee, if confirmed, what specifically do you think the FCC can do to ensure that the 6G rollout is smoother than the 5G rollout was?
Great. Thank you for the question, and I really agree with so much of what you said. I'll start with cybersecurity and making sure networks are deployed in a secure way, and I applaud this committee on making sure the Rip and Replace Fund was fully funded. I've been interested to see the creation of the National Security Council at the FCC, and I think that's an opportunity for the FCC to leverage its authorities in the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act to ban other high-risk equipment and vendors from our nation's communications networks. I also think the FCC can promote the adoption of open radio access network technology, which can help diversify and strengthen our domestic supply chain so that we're not overly reliant on one or two vendors. And I think it can help increase security, competition, and ultimately reduce the cost of providing these networks in the first place.
I'm a big supporter as well on strengthening our supply chains. We actually have a Cantwell, Blackburn, Blunt, Rochester bill. I like to call those my strange bedfellows bills, where we come together on these issues that we know are going to affect all of us. I want to also discuss the potential security concerns about 6G, particularly given, again, the flaws in 4G and 5G networks, such as a study finding that 100% of 4G networks were susceptible to denial of service attacks, and 5G being vulnerable to network attacks. I know this is an easy one, so maybe it's a yes or no. Will you prioritize cybersecurity for 6G networks?
Yes, Senator.
And what other potential measures do you think the FCC can take to best secure 6G networks in particular?
You know, I think this a lot of this can be done through AI. I'm really excited about the development of the technology, and I think there are tremendous use cases in not only detecting fraud and scams, but securing the network itself. So if I'm confirmed, I would look to leverage artificial intelligence in these ways.
You kind of preempted my next question, which deals with so many Americans. It's estimated that around 4 billion robocalls are made per month. In fact, Delaware, while we're the first state, I don't like the fact that we're the first state in robocall complaints. I think I've probably received four of them while I was sitting here. And there's now this AI-powered grandparent scams. Back when I was in the House, as I mentioned some of the legislation I introduced, but we had one on the Fraud and Scam Reduction Act to help tackle scams that target seniors. And I encouraged the FCC, I'm encouraged that they now cover AI voice calls under the TCPA. And last year, now Chair Carr supported requiring callers to disclose upfront to consumers when they receive an AI-generated call. Do you support requiring callers to disclose to consumers when it's an AI-generated call?
I certainly think that can be helpful in protecting consumers from illegal robocallers, Senator.
And I will say consumer protection is one of the areas that we are very much focused on. Should you be confirmed, would like to continue to work with you on that. And Mr. Isaacman, we had a very good conversation as well. I will be submitting questions for the record because I respect the chairman's time. So I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Well, thank you both for being here today. Mr. Isaacman, the U.S. economy, national defense, infrastructure, they all rely on satellites extensively these days for GPS, for weather, for communications purposes. for surveillance and much more. So a collision or a loss of key satellites could result in even in catastrophic national security and economic costs. As you know, the TRACS system, Traffic Coordination System for Space, was launched in 2024. It's being developed to provide situational awareness data across civil, military, and commercial sectors. Mr. Isaacman, if confirmed, how would you ensure that NASA coordinates with Department of Commerce and DoD on space situational awareness and space traffic management efforts?
Senator, thank you very much for the question. This is a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. My 2 missions to space, the #1 risk we faced was from orbital debris. For starters, I think NASA absolutely will play a role as this new frontier continues to open, and ideally we have lots of space stations and lots of activity and a great flourishing economic environment in space. I believe all of the information that we can gather from our assets on space debris should be funneled into a single mission control that has the ultimate situational awareness. But I have to say also the biggest threat, Senator, is what we can't track. What is so tiny, the millimeter-sized objects at orbital velocity that can shred a satellite or a spacecraft. And in that respect, we have to stop adding to the problem. The United States is very good at not adding to the problem. I can't say that's the same for some of our geopolitical rivals, sir.
Maybe you could speak with a little more specificity about the gravity of the problem. Paint the picture for those who might be watching these proceedings about how extensive this challenge has become, and I'll just let you take it from there.
Senator, absolutely. A lot of people think of whether it's a discarded second stage in orbit or a defunct satellite as the problem. We know where they are, and we can have trajectories that avoid them. The issue is the speck of paint that falls off that satellite that's now traveling at 17,500 miles an hour and can collide with another object going 17,500 miles an hour. I had an opportunity to visit the NASA facility, the White Sands Missile Range, and see what a 1 and 2 millimeter piece of aluminum does at near orbital velocities, and I can tell you what it penetrates through is it's eye-opening to say the least. It is an issue. We certainly need to do all we can to avoid any sort of kinetic conflict in low Earth orbit, to stop adding to the problem. And again, I think the United States does a fantastic job at doing this. We need to work really hard to make sure others, maybe less responsible actors, don't add to the problem.
Well, I'd like to work with you on this challenge, should you be confirmed, as I believe you will be. So clearly you're conversant in it, and it sounds like you'll be prioritizing this. Ms. Trusty, the FCC's International Bureau Telecom and Analysis Division, TAD, issues licenses to own and operate submarine cables and associated landing stations in the United States. Commercial undersea telecom cables carry approximately 99% of transoceanic digital communication, serving as a physical backbone for our internet. Since 2022, Russia has stepped up its attacks on this infrastructure. In 2023, Yiping 3, a Chinese tanker that had previously departed a Russian port, cut 2 Baltic Sea cables. You know, incidents like this, we're reading about them on a regular basis these days. Ms. Trusty, what steps is the FCC's TAD office taking to protect undersea cable infrastructure and the sensitive data and information transmitted across undersea cables every day?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I think this is such an important issue. I focused a lot on it during my time on the Armed Services Committee. This is such an important part of our critical infrastructure, and I think we need to do more to secure it. As you mentioned, the FCC works closely with Team Telecom to review and approve undersea cable applications. I think we can promote more transparency in our foreign ownership in these undersea cables so we have a better sense of what the risks might be. I also think we should try to promote more U.S.-led undersea cable projects so that we can eliminate the risks entirely. In addition to that, I think exploring the diversification of undersea cable routes to ensure that there's no single point of failure to the extent an undersea cable is disrupted. But I think as a protective measure, we should work on strengthening our disaster recovery and emergency response plans, given that some of these cables are so vulnerable to exploitation. But if I'm confirmed, Senator, this would be a priority of mine.
My office will follow up with you on some of your answers for further elaboration, but I do get the sense you're very much dialed into this. I'll just make one last comment, knowing that we have colleagues waiting. Setting standards, Ms. Trustee, at the FCC through international governing bodies is increasingly important. I think we have been outflanked over the years by the Chinese in particular, but also by others, and we need to develop a unified position here at the federal level between the FCC and state and NTIA and various other entities so that we can prioritize this moving forward. So we'll follow up with a question for the record about that as well. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Senator Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As ranking member of the Aviation and Space Subcommittee, I am looking forward to getting a bipartisan NASA reauthorization done to make sure that NASA is able to execute its mission with a consistent vision and congressional support, free of undue influence from any temporary government employees. According to the Global Counter Space Capabilities Report published this month, the PRC is rapidly advancing a broad spectrum of counter space capabilities as part of a sustained push to secure military power in orbit and expand their presence in space. The PRC has also started building its second satellite internet constellation in lower Earth orbit and has committed to continued human presence in LEO at its Tiangong space station. More than ever, NASA's missions need to be consistent and laser focused and avoid major subversions of mission priorities and diversion of funds, not only for our global space leadership, but also for national security. I'm going to, Mr. Isaacman, ask you a couple of yes/no questions. But first, I just want to say that a sustained human presence in low Earth orbit is crucial for advancing scientific research, testing technologies for future deep space missions, and fostering a thriving economy and global leadership, as LEO serves as a unique environment for research, development, and training due to its microgravity environment. By supporting extended human operations in LEO, NASA can test exploration systems, conduct human research, and maintain operational expertise, vitals for missions on the Moon and to Mars. These are not things that can be done by machine alone, and a gap in our human presence in LEO will likely result in ceding our leadership to the PRC. Mr. Isaacman, do you support maintaining continuous human presence in low Earth orbit?
I do, Senator. I think if reusability has given us anything, it's a very affordable path to send American astronauts to and from low Earth orbit.
Thank you. Elon Musk has suggested that the International Space Station's strategic value has run its course and should be deorbited as soon as possible to focus on a mission to Mars. For the last 20, and that's a quote, he said, as soon as possible. For the last 26 years, the strategic value of the International Space Station has been invaluable, serving as a beacon of the United States global leadership and a symbol of what we can accomplish through international cooperation. Funnily enough, although I don't think it's very funny at all, SpaceX has been awarded the contract to deorbit the International Space Station. Mr. Isaacman, do you believe there's still utility in maintaining a U.S. presence on the ISS at least through 2030 as currently planned?
Senator, as I mentioned in my prepared remarks, I think we need to use up every bit of life that's remaining on the International Space Station so we can crack the code on the space economy and better hand off those responsibilities to commercial industry. I am familiar with Mr. Musk's remarks in that. I do think he is a very accomplished entrepreneur. I would like to understand his rationale behind that, just as I think, Administrator Webb would want to hear from all of the commercial contract leaders from the 1960s during the space race.
But you don't think that we should deorbit the ISS now?
I do not think we should deorbit it now. I think we need to make the most use of the space station while we have it and figure out what we can accomplish in the unique environment of microgravity and figure out the space economy for commercial LEO.
Thank you. The Artemis program is critical in our effort to return to the Moon, and returning to the Moon is seen as a stepping stone for broader human exploration and critical for scientific discovery, advancing technology, and as a necessary preparation for eventually progressing to human mission to Mars. I know a few of my colleagues already today have tried to get a specific answer out of you, but you have avoided directly answering them today. So I ask again, Mr. Isaacman, do you support maintaining NASA long-term mission to maintaining maintaining NASA's long-term mission to maintain a human activity on the moon?
Senator, I'm sorry if I'm not sounding clear on this. I think it's imperative that we do both. I think that's what NASA was created to do. I would love nothing more than to see this crew get around the moon, for us to land on the moon, figure out its scientific, economic, national security value, while we were also charting a course in line with President Trump's vision for American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on Mars.
So you think we can do both simultaneously?
I mean, we do multiple flagship scientific missions at NASA. We maintain a presence in LEO, where we're undertaking dozens of scientific experiments at once. I think we can, ma'am.
You think we can maintain a mission, a presence on the moon and a mission to Mars simultaneously?
I think we can do the moon and Mars and beyond.
Okay. Whatever we can do to support the space program, I'm on board. I just have one final question I'm asking all the Trump nominees. If given an illegal or unconstitutional order by President Trump or your superiors, would you oppose it?
I don't think President Trump would give an illegal order, but I would follow the law, ma'am.
And you would oppose if he were?
I don't believe the president would give me an illegal order, ma'am.
Okay, that's fine. But if given an illegal or unconstitutional order, will you oppose it?
I will always follow the law, ma'am.
So is that a yes? You will oppose the illegal order if given one by either the president or your superiors?
Senator, I will always follow the law.
I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Moreno.
I'll start with you, Mrs. Trustee. Thank you so much for taking the time in my office. We did not know each other before meeting with you. Your parents are beaming with pride, which I love to see, with good reason. You're somebody who has an incredibly great temperament, incredible intellect, and I can't think of somebody more qualified to do your job, honestly. The one question I have for you is, there's a scourge of robocalls, creates enormous amounts of scammers. Seniors are getting built of their life savings. How would you use advanced technologies to put an end to this?
Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate this question because you're right. I worry about the susceptibility of our youth and seniors to robocall scams, and I really worry about how illegal robocallers, as we just discussed, are leveraging artificial intelligence to get around call authentication measures. So I think generally the FCC could benefit from stronger enforcement authorities and penalties to go after illegal robocallers. I also think the FCC can continue its work in working with international counterparts as well as states' attorneys generals to go after these fraudsters. But I think we need to discuss more proactive call blocking measures so that these calls never reach the end user. So again, I think artificial intelligence is the key here.
Well, thank you, and I can't wait to have you in that agency taking care of it, and I'm sure you will. And again, thank you for serving this country.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Isaacson, I'm sure with your deep intellect that you know that the Aircraft Engine Research Laboratory in Cleveland, Ohio, was created 17 years before NASA was created. And there's a sign when you drive into the center that says, "For the benefit of all." What does that mean to you?
Well, Senator, I do believe that NASA's mission is to undertake the near impossible, to solve the most demanding, complex engineering challenges, to bring commercial industry can follow, and to bring the rest of the world along the way.
And that's something that I'm sure you have a passion, a deep passion to make sure that we are always the leaders. Is that correct?
100%, Senator.
And just for the record, could you give me a sense of the scale of difficulty it was for you as a kid, if I can say that, as a teenager, to create a company that would become as successful as yours? Give me the scale of difficulty and kind of give me the one example of like a deep challenge you faced making that happen that you thought maybe was impossible.
Senator, there was certainly a lot of ups and downs over the last 26 years. I'd say probably some of the earliest challenges, although, I mean, as a company that went through the dot-com, the Great Recession, the pandemic, we certainly had our fair share of obstacles along the way. Probably some of the hardest was the earliest days, Senator, where we tried to grow through our own cash flows, which is always a challenge. And I was 16 years old, so I had to make sure I hid myself from any trade shows or in-person meetings. Occasionally, someone would show up at the house for a meeting, and my father fortunately took that for me.
It's always hard to meet underachievers. So congratulations on that. How will you use that skill set at a complex organization like NASA?
Senator, NASA is an extraordinary agency, and they are the most accomplished, well-respected space agency in the world. I want to do whatever I can and work alongside the best and brightest to continue that. I do suspect there are some things that I've learned through running two successful businesses over the last more than 2 decades that I think I can help bring to the agency. I would love to roll up my sleeves, figure out what are the challenges we have from a program management perspective that are causing everything to take longer than it should and cost more than it should. I'd like to instill a very strong mission-first culture at the agency that if we can execute on our mission and get to the moon, get to Mars, and all the other things, the inspiration, the STEM education will all take care of itself. A culture of ownership and accountability. That when we make mistakes, we own them, we fix them, and we get back to delivering on their important objectives.
Well, thank you for that. And I have one last question. Ms. Trustee, 100% unequivocal support from me. Hope to see my Democrat colleagues join us and see if we can get as many votes for you as humanly possible. But for Mr. Isaacman, I have one question. It does hinge, for me, the entirety of whether I can support your nomination or not. Who is the most important character in the movie Armageddon?
Clearly, Bruce Willis for the important self-sacrifice for all mankind, sir.
All right. Let the record show he did not say Dan Truman, which makes me wonder of his judgment, but I will still reserve my vote for you.
Thank you, Senator Moreno. I would note that when you were describing the motto for the benefit of all in the facility in Ohio, I thought you were going to reference the phrase "to serve man," the classic Twilight Zone episode that ends with "It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!" Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Trustee, congratulations on your nomination. As you know, I authored the E-Rate E for Education program in the House of Representatives as part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, because I believe then and I believe now that access to education shouldn't depend on your zip code. Thanks to the E-Rate, thousands of schools in the United States now have high-speed internet access. That's millions of students who can research, learn, and grow with the tools they need to succeed in the 21st century economy. Do you agree that the E-Rate program has been a success?
Senator, thank you. Yes, I agree that E-Rate has been an important part of making sure students are connected across the country.
Student education has changed a lot since I created the E-Rate program nearly 30 years ago. Today, learning often extends outside the schoolhouse, putting many low-income and rural students who lack internet access at home at a serious disadvantage. Do you agree that having access to high-speed broadband at home is important for students and educators in our modern educational environment?
Certainly, Senator, I think having access to broadband at home, at school, everywhere across the country is important.
And do you agree that a predictable funding source for E-Rate is critical for schools and libraries to stay connected?
Yes, Senator, the Communications Act requires a specific, predictable, and sufficient funding source for universal service.
Thank you. Now, let's turn to a different issue. Over the past few months, Chairman Carr has taken a series of steps to attack broadcasters over their news programming. He pressured CBS to release a transcript of an interview with Vice President Harris that supposedly contained evidence of deceptive editing. When the transcript clearly refuted that allegation, Chairman Carr still opened a docket to accept public comments on it. He's taken similarly baseless steps against ABC and NBC, and he opened an investigation into the underwriting practices of public broadcasters without citing any evidence of wrongdoing. Taken together, these actions indicate a chairman intent on weaponizing the FCC's legal authorities for ideological and partisan purposes. Ms. Trustee, I understand you cannot comment on open proceedings, so I will ask generally, do you agree that the FCC should not open or conduct investigations for political purposes?
Yes, Senator, I agree with that.
If asked to vote on an investigation or enforcement matter that violates the First Amendment, will you vote against that matter?
So, Senator, I don't want to speculate on something that hasn't happened yet, but what I can tell you is—
If it's a violation of the First Amendment, will you vote against it?
What I can tell you is I firmly believe in the First Amendment. I believe, and I won't do anything to violate it.
Okay, but that's what I wanted to hear. And I'm glad to hear that you will take that position, and I'm going to be closely monitoring the Commission's work to ensure that it complies with the First Amendment. Thank you. Mr. Isaacman, you have deep personal and financial ties to Elon Musk. You have invested tens of millions of dollars in SpaceX. You have paid millions of dollars to SpaceX for 2 private space flights. Your payments company, Shift4, has an ongoing, quote, global strategic partnership with Starlink worth millions each year. And according to a recent Wall Street Journal report, Musk personally asked you to lead NASA. Given SpaceX's significant interest before NASA, you can understand why the public would be concerned about conflicts of interest here. So let's try to set a few things straight. I understand that you met with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago in late 2024. Is that correct?
No, Senator, I was in Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
So you did not meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I went to Mar-a-Lago to be interviewed by the President of the United States.
I didn't ask you that. Did you meet with Elon Musk at Mar-a-Lago?
I believe he was one of dozens of people that were around Mar-a-Lago at the time, Senator.
So did you meet with him?
I would not say we had a meeting. We probably had a conversation in passing, Senator.
Okay, during that same trip, then President-elect Trump offered you the NASA administrator job. Is that correct?
At the conclusion of the meeting, Senator, he did.
Thank you. Was Elon Musk in your meeting when Trump offered you the NASA position at Mar-a-Lago?
Senator, I was interviewed by the President of the United States.
Was Elon Musk in the meeting when he offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
Elon Musk was not in the meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Senator, I was being interviewed and speaking with the President of the United States.
You just say he was not in the meeting. Was he in the meeting or not in the meeting?
Senator, I'm trying to be as transparent as I can. I was being interviewed by the President of the United States.
It's not a difficult question. Was Elon Musk in the room when the President offered you the job?
Senator, my meeting was with the President of the United States.
I'm assuming that you don't want to answer the question directly because Elon Musk was in the room. I think that's the only conclusion anyone listening to this could reach, unless you want to dispel us of that notion.
Senator, again, I was being interviewed by the President of the United States, and I also say I have no.
That's not. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to determine Elon Musk's role in this, and you're not willing to be fully transparent. Have you discussed your plans for NASA with Elon Musk?
I have not.
So those questions obviously raise serious questions, and I want to turn to one more specific question. Monitoring sea level rise to polar ice loss to wildfires, NASA's satellites are the backbone of climate research used by scientists, policymakers, and the public across the globe. NASA's Earth Observing System collects and archives more than 147 terabytes of data each day. This data underpins climate action efforts at every level of the government, and it drives global research collaborations, and it informs life-saving disaster response. It's a public good, yet the Trump administration is seeking to undermine that. A recent investigation found that large swaths of climate data sets, visualizations, and web tools, once publicly accessible, have been altered or taken down. This unprecedented rollback of public information compromises scientific continuity and transparency at a time of accelerating climate threats and extreme weather events. If confirmed, will you commit to fully restoring and maintaining access to data, as well as resisting any political pressure to sideline climate research at NASA?
Senator, I can tell you I am very passionate about the Earth Sciences Division inside of NASA, especially with respect to anything that has impact on human life and the financial repercussions for remediating things such as wildfires, landslides, flooding. Earth Sciences also plays a big role in near-Earth asteroid protection.
Will you make a commitment to restore all of that information so that it's available to the public? It's vital scientific information.
Senator, I have not been made aware of any information that's not being provided. I mean, I'm just not familiar with any of these changes, Senator.
I'm very disappointed in your question. All this information is vital to getting the information into the hands of scientists and ultimately ordinary citizens to protect.
Thank you, Senator Markey.
And I appreciate your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Isaacman, in response to Senator Duckworth, you said multiple times you will follow the law. Under every circumstance, you will follow the law. I appreciate that commitment. I want to go back and revisit the exchange you had with Senator Kim, because one component of the law, you have said, and I'm glad to hear it, that under your leadership, America will beat China back to the moon. That's important. But the law is clear beyond simply going to the moon. That's part of it, that going to the moon shall be a stepping stone for further exploration of Mars. The ultimate objective is Mars, but going to the moon is critical. The law also specifies explicitly the administrator shall, and when legislation uses the word shall, it denotes a mandatory obligation. The administrator shall establish a program to develop a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon. With respect to Senator Kim, you were reluctant to commit on a sustained human presence on the moon. Could you clarify your view on that to this committee?
Well, Senator, as a space enthusiast, I'd like nothing more, as I've said before, to see a number of lunar outposts and Mars outposts, and for us to even progress farther out into our solar system. If we are in an unlimited budgetary environment, we can maintain an ongoing presence on the lunar surface. I am more than supportive of it. I think it's imperative that we have to get back to the moon first, as quickly as we possibly can, figure out, again, the scientific, economic, national security value to being there, which I am very hopeful that we are going to find in order to support the ongoing presence on the lunar surface, sir.
So the statute is written in the disjunctive. It gives the choice of either the surface of the moon or cislunar orbit. What is your view on the Gateway project?
Senator, that's an area that if I'm confirmed, I would love to roll up my sleeves and get further understand what's working right, what are the opportunities the Gateway presents to us, and where are some of the challenges, because I think the Gateway is a component of many programs that are over budget and behind schedule, sir.
So you're describing Gateway as over budget and behind schedule. I will say there's a long history in NASA of administrations coming in and canceling programs and causing massive delays. Barack Obama did that with Constellation, and NASA struggled for years as a consequence. As administrator, are you going to cancel the Gateway program?
Senator, I have no intention as of now to say that I would cancel any program. I need to, if I'm confirmed, get in the job and understand where things are at. I want to assure you and this committee that I want to see America win and succeed and lead in space, whether that be the moon, Mars, low Earth orbit, and beyond. I do not want to see us come in second place, and I certainly don't want to see the right-hand side of that poster you put up, sir.
So I want to ask you again, because you've said you'll follow the law, are you committed to a sustained human presence in cislunar space or on the moon? And that is federal statute.
Senator, if that is the law, then I'm committed to it.
Okay. All right, let's talk LEO. The International Space Station is managed at a Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. NASA is planning to retire the ISS by 2030, replacing it with one or more commercially developed space stations funded partially by NASA and partially by outside customers. Unfortunately, both NASA and commercial replacements are behind schedule. Do you agree that we cannot have a gap period between the ISS and its successor when there would be zero human U.S. presence in low Earth orbit?
I do agree, Senator. We cannot cede low Earth orbit to the Chinese.
Now, I would note in the first Trump administration, there were those in the administration pushing to deorbit the International Space Station prematurely. Given that we've invested over $100 billion in the station, I think that would be profoundly foolish to give up on that investment as long as it is safe to continue using it. After the administration floated this idea multiple times, the United States Senate passed legislation that I authored, 100-0. Every Republican and every senator came through committing that we would maintain the International Space Station at least until 2030, as long as it is safe and scientifically feasible. Will you commit to follow the law and not deorbit the space station before 2030?
Senator, I will absolutely commit to follow the law, and I think we need to maximize the return that taxpayers have invested in that orbital laboratory, use every bit of time we have to crack the code on the space economy, and give commercial LEO destinations a fighting chance when they inevitably take over, sir.
Ms. Trusty, it's been 2 years since the FCC lost general auction authority and 3 years since the last meaningful auction of spectrum. The Spectrum Pipeline Act, which I introduced with Leader Thune and with Senator Blackburn last year, would restore the FCC's auction authority and would establish a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum for commercial use. Ms. Trusty, should Congress restore the FCC's general auction authority with a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum?
Yes, Senator, and to the extent it accommodates both our economic and national security interests, and I believe it can.
So what would be the benefits of restoring the auction authority with a clear pipeline of mid-band spectrum?
Thank you, Senator. I think there would be tremendous economic benefits, job creation, workforce productivity, the expansion of broadband services across the country. I also think it's foundational to our leadership internationally on global technologies.
As you know, the Department of Defense has been highly resistant to giving up any spectrum. And for a long time, they have given a parade of horribles as to what would occur if any spectrum moved to the commercial sector. I find that parade of horribles highly incredible and the result of bureaucratic intransigence. It's an intransigence that began when General Milley was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and DOD chose a strategy of absolutely resisting and refusing to work on freeing up spectrum. I recently had a classified briefing, of which you're aware, where I asked 2 questions to the senior leadership at DOD and also senior leadership of the Intelligence Committee. The first question I asked was, over 50 countries across the planet have moved substantial portions of the spectrum in question to the commercial sector, and they're being used presently for commercial purposes. Is it DOD's position that our Navy does not operate in the Pacific, that we can only defend Topeka, Kansas, and the rest of the world, our military is unable to defend the United States? You have unique expertise, having worked both on the Commerce Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee. In your opinion, are we able to defend ourselves across the globe, even in areas where other countries have moved significant portions of spectrum to be available for the commercial sector?
Senator, I appreciate this question. So I'll say I'm not privy to all of DOD's spectrum assets and capabilities, but I do think there's an opportunity to move forward on spectrum policy that protects both our national security and advances our economic interests. And I think what that really requires is, like you said, having classified briefings or briefings in the public where multiple stakeholder perspectives are represented to challenge positions on various matters. I think it promotes transparency and it ensures, I think, there's more cohesion on spectrum matters going forward.
The second question that I asked DOD that they had a totally insufficient answer to was, what would be the national security consequences, and I would add the economic security consequences, if America loses the race for 6G and the global telecom architecture is built by Huawei and controlled by the Chinese communists, and every active duty serviceman and woman who has their own cell phone is now communicating over Chinese telecom infrastructure. In your judgment, what would be the economic interest and the national security interest if that occurred, if we lose the race to 6G?
Senator, I hope we could all agree that it would be devastating to our economic and national security interests if we had to be reliant on Chinese technologies.
Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Glad I made it back. Ms. Trustee, you both.
I did filibuster a little bit for you.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to that virtual multi-channel video programming distribution issue at the FCC. I want to understand whether you think the FCC should re-examine and negotiate with online platforms that carriage of local news content. I'm concerned that these large platforms, because of the way things have evolved with the affiliates kind of leaving the broadcasters to themselves, and yet they could have some ability. Right now, I believe local broadcasting is holding us together in a lot of ways. It's a trusted source of content that people believe in. They believe their local news organization. They think that model probably wouldn't exist if the community didn't believe in the product. And so we don't want to lose that. But as the digital age continues to evolve and these products and services continue to evolve, like YouTube now being a dominant content distributor, then the ability to negotiate directly with them is a big revenue opportunity, if you will. So how do you look at that issue? Do you think that this should be looked at by the FCC and help level the playing field for local journalism?
Senator, I do. So, to your point about localism, I think it's extremely important. Broadcasters provide vital news and information about social and cultural events, educational programming, and information in disasters. And I think it's incumbent upon the FCC to work with Congress to ensure we have a modern regulatory framework that reflects the realities of today's media marketplace, that enables broadcasters to better compete against technology companies for viewers, for ad revenues, for programming, all things that they can generate resources by to reinvest into their news gathering operations and increase the availability of local news.
Okay. And what do you think the best way for, I think they opened that case many years ago and then closed, then haven't reopened it, or actually, technically, I'm not sure about that. You probably know the answer. It's probably like in quasi land where you could just easily reopen it. Is that right?
Well, I think it's still open before the commission. I'm happy to take a look at it if confirmed. I know that it's been a question on your mind for the past couple of FCC nominations hearings, but I think it's an important issue, Senator. I'm happy to take a look at it and ask the questions.
Right, but you think it should be re-looked at? Is that?
I'm certainly happy
Yes.
to take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. And then I can't even. Okay, I'm sure you believe in the First Amendment. I'm sure you believe in not weaponizing, making sure that we have a free press. Back to this broadband issue, as we've continued to allocate resources and look to the FCC, what do you think the best thing the FCC could do now to put more clarity behind the shortfall in broadband inequities?
So I think when we talk about broadband inequities, I think about affordability and adoption. And so with respect to affordability, I think we can promote more competition, embrace more technologies. I think when you have more choice in the marketplace, that helps to reduce the cost of the service. I also think we can focus on removing regulatory barriers that might impede broadband deployment or raise the cost of broadband deployment. If those regulatory barriers are out of the way, I also think that can reduce costs for consumers. Of course, we have the Lifeline program as well. And so as the committee is looking at potential reforms to USF, perhaps there's an opportunity to make adjustments to better target those services to communities in need. I'd also speak to digital literacy programs. I know that the private industry, public interest groups have programs of that sort to help people understand how to maximize the benefit of this technology in their lives.
But what about the mapping?
Of course.
I mean, I think we might probably even shared with you that Microsoft data that they came up with, which can tell you by household who doesn't have broadband.
Absolutely. I think maps are foundational to closing the digital divide. And we have the Broadband Data Act, but of course, there's always room for improvement. So if I'm confirmed, I would welcome the opportunity to work with private sector stakeholders like your own constituents to better improve the maps.
Well, I think it could help us elevate a conversation into what are the choices that we could have if we really understood that people at $40,000 of income probably aren't buying broadband, which means their kids from a school perspective and other things might not be getting the access that we want, and then obviously the impact it has on communities. And then back to the spectrum, I listened to what you said earlier, even though I've been running in and out at various votes, that you believe that the DoD side of this equation needs to be thought through that your experience here and then your experience there gave you two different viewpoints on this. How do you think the FCC could best help in resolving this issue? How do we, let me say it differently. 10 or 15 years ago, we probably would have said the FCC is the undisputed scientific leader. You know, you would go to your scientist and you would say, this is what they say about interference, right? But now the world's changed and we have so much more on the technology front. And now we have agencies disputing each other, right? DOD and FAA or, you know, various things. How do you think you can reassert the FCC's scientific leadership on this issue when so much of the conversation ends up having, you know, downstairs in a secure briefing room?
Sure, I appreciate this question. I think this is probably the heart of the issue, that engineers don't agree on interference metrics, among other things. So this is where I think the FCC NTIA MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, could probably come into play.
The one that they just did? Or you mean a new one?
Maybe a new one that's updated and reflects some of these other considerations. Maybe we have to hire more engineers and technical people to help address this issue who have experience in both camps as well. So those are potentially some ideas to address this.
And then what about the secure nature of this? I'm pretty sure, Mr. Isaacman, it is interesting you're here together. It's made it harder for all of us because there's ample questions to ask both of you. But you are an intersection of a very big, important, what is not just a communication system, but is a vulnerability for national security if we don't get it right. And so I think Mr. Isaacman can tell you how broad he thinks this is going to go in the future, the constellations, not just the LEOs that he's talking about, but how much more of this communication is going to happen through the satellite system and why we have to have this layer of security. But do you have ideas that you think the FCC could do in listening more to the a framework by which the private sector and agencies could have more conversations about what the future looks like and thereby, you know, find some more common ground?
So I think this goes back to a conversation we had a little bit earlier about folks having clearances, because much of this information is classified or in a special access program, and it's very sensitive. And so, you know, I know that some people in the industry do have clearances, but to the extent we can bring those folks into the same room with federal agencies to have these robust conversations about what the needs and interests are, what the objectives are, to try to find common ground, I think that's the most important thing here.
I didn't mean to engage you on this, but Mr. Isaacman, do you understand my point that there's so much yet to still happen here? That how do we get the dialogue towards the advancements that could happen when basically everybody needs a national security clearance, and yet at the same time give people an understanding of where we could come together? Ms. Trustee, you do support the effort, the NTIA's report that DOD and NTIA should look at dynamic spectrum sharing. You do support that?
Yes, I think we should be investing in dynamic spectrum sharing technologies.
Okay. Mr. Isaacman, any thoughts here?
Senator, I wouldn't want to encroach on my nominee's clear command over the spectrum here. I would say, at least through the lens of NASA, I'm excited about what commercial industry is working on in terms of next generation technology. My most recent mission to space, we tested out sending an awful lot of data securely over a laser link, a beam of light. I think that's a great way, at least from NASA's perspective, to not add to the demand problem with respect to the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think this will be one of the big challenges we face is how do we, if we want this leadership position, how do we think ahead? How do we get this conversation with the private sector who's really doing a lot of that thinking, but also get the DOD part of it and then get the dynamic spectrum part of it done correctly? Okay, well, thank you both very much. Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trustee, I'm going to ask you a final question required of all nominees. If confirmed, do you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee to provide thorough and timely responses to the committee's request and appear before the committee when requested?
Yes, Senator.
I do, Senator.
Thank you. I have letters of support from various organizations for Mr. Isaacman and Ms. Trustee's nomination that I would ask unanimous consent to be inserted into the record. So without objection, so ordered. Senators will have until the close of business Friday, April 11th to submit questions for the record. These nominees will have until the close of business Tuesday, April 15th to respond to these questions. I thank Senator Cruz for allowing me to come back and ask these questions. That concludes our hearing today. The committee stands adjourned.